Welcome to NAMI Family Forum. I am NAMI Finger Lakes Executive Director, Beth McGee. Thank you for joining tonight's program. NAMI Finger Lakes is your local affiliate of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization dedicated to building better lives for the millions of Americans affected by mental illness. Locally, NAMI provides a helpline, support groups, and education and advocacy opportunities for families and friends of people living with mental health conditions. All of our services are free. This event is being recorded and will be available on the NAMI Finger Lakes YouTube channel soon, where you can also find our previous family forums and other events. So find us there and hit like and subscribe to be notified when we share new content there. So let's get started with this evening's program. I'd like to welcome Jenna Hotaling of Finger Lakes Problem Gambling Resource Center. Jenna is the team leader for the for the Finger Lakes Problem Gambling Resource Center, FLPGRC. Since the fall of 2018, she has been leading the PGRC team through outreach efforts, community education, and policy, and raising awareness on problem gambling. Jenna, welcome. Thank you for being with us on Family Forum.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Would you like to take a minute to tell us a little bit about yourself and PGRC and what you're going to share with us this evening?
Sure, absolutely. So you summed it up quite well, but I have a background in health education and working with grassroots community work. I enjoy doing these types of presentations. So as you mentioned, I've been a part of the Finger Lakes Problem Gambling Resource Center for a little over 3 years now. So what I'll be talking about today is just some basic information on what problem gambling is, who it impacts, some warning signs. We'll talk about some overlap between other issues such as mental health and substance use. And then we'll have various ways that you can go ahead and connect with the Finger Lakes Problem Gambling Resource Center, or if you or a loved one is experiencing anything related to a gambling issue. So do you want me to go ahead and share my screen?
Sure. I'm really glad that you're with us because I think that there's a lot of information that the community just isn't aware of, and I'm looking forward to being able to share that.
Absolutely. Okay, let me go ahead and put this on full screen. Okay. Thank you again, everyone, for tuning in and taking a look at this information. I'm hoping it'll be very helpful for the work that you do, or even just to shed some light on what problem gambling is and what resources are available in your area. So just before we get into the good stuff, I just want to give you a little bit of background on my agency. So the Finger Lakes PGRC is a program of the New York Council on Problem Gambling. So they're located in Albany, and they have the same goals that we do, which is just to increase awareness on problem and compulsive gambling, as well as advocating for support services and treatment options for persons adversely affected by gambling. Just to note, the council and all PGRCs maintain a neutral stance on gambling, meaning we're not pro or anti-gambling. We just exist to assist people in the community with any type of support systems that they may need. So as I mentioned, we are a program of the New York Council. There are 7 regional resource centers throughout the state of New York. So every single county is covered by one of these resource centers. So we do a lot of these types of community-led efforts, such as doing trainings and presentations on problem gambling. And we really like to work one-on-one with partner organizations, which is why I'm so happy that we've been connected with NAMI Finger Lakes, because there's, as you will see, there's a lot of overlap between mental health issues and problem gambling. So what is gambling? So we'll start with just the basic way of how to define gambling, not problem gambling just yet, but typically what I do is when I have a live audience is we make this a little bit more interactive. So I'll just go through the answers real quick with you. So gambling is involving risk, value, chance, reward. So in looking at this more as kind of a flow chart, so you're risking anything of value. So it's typically money, but it can be anything that that person finds of value to them. such as so I've heard some people betting their car, or betting other things in their house. There's been an instance where an online gambling forum, some man bet his wife on a high stakes poker game. So it definitely, the value is different, but typically it is money. And as I mentioned, that game of chance. So that chance game is what is involved within gambling, in the hopes of that desired result, which is that reward. And that's what we think of as gambling. So just to give some borderline statistics of how folks are impacted in the United States. So about 85% of adults have gambled at least once in their lives. So we're looking at people that are 18 plus, and then looking at 60% have gambled in the past year. Just kind of an overarching just combination of what types of gambling are available in today's society. So we have the video lottery, so your lottery tickets, or the quick draw. We've got dice and card games, internet gambling, pull tabs and scratch offs that I've seen more frequently down in more lake town areas or more rural areas. Sports wagering, which has become huge. There's also going to be availability of mobile sports wagering soon. We've got the games of skill like poker. And when I say skill in quotes, it still is a game of chance. It has some element of skill, but really every game that you're risking something is gambling. Bingo, raffles, and office pools and lottery games. So some emerging gambling options. So I did want to put in a few slides on some emerging trends that we're seeing, especially as it relates to online and mobile gambling. So just saying that over again, risking something of value on a game of chance for a desired reward, but it's utilizing the internet via computer or mobile device. So typically someone would do it on their desktop or their laptop or their tablet, smartphone, whatever device has internet capabilities. So these games provide opportunities to play slots, card games, etc. online instead of going somewhere in person. So that increases the availability and accessibility of gambling options. So why is it risky? So as I just mentioned, the availability increases tenfold with any type of online activity. What I've seen, it's quick paced. So it's that high reward sensation that someone would get from an online game. It's instantaneous. But there's also an inaccurate perception of money and amounts wagered, especially when you don't have the physical money in front of you. You're using a credit card or something behind the scenes. So you're not really feeling the loss, so to speak. So with gaming, I do want to talk about the overlap between gaming and gambling. On the left, I have a picture of a loot box, which is pretty popular within Overwatch, which is a video game that a lot of young adults and teenagers enjoy. Sorry, I'm just grabbing a sip of water. So in talking about gaming, so when someone uses gambling within a gaming component, they could be risking loot boxes or in-game casinos. They could be utilizing those types of things that are already kind of linked up within the gaming platform. So another thing right here on the right, this is actually a casino game. As you can see, it kind of replicates the look and the feel of someone playing like a sniper game, for example, or a shooter game. So a lot of it kind of translates and makes it kind of eye-catching and easy for someone who wants to play this game to go in and gamble. So why is gaming risky? I do want to mention that there are blurred lines between playing video games for fun and gambling. So for example, someone who's gaming, they're utilizing whatever console they may have and having fun virtually, with friends or solo games. But whenever someone has the component included in their game, which could be translated into gambling, that is also kind of higher risk because it could potentially, could potentially have some negative consequences in the future if they're exposed to gambling at a young age. There's an inaccurate perception of money and increased microtransactions in any type of gaming platform. So with sports, I just want to mention legal sports betting is quickly increasing. So mobile sports betting will be introduced as a law. Well, it did this past year. And I know that a lot of casinos and other organizations are trying to get that those steps in place, FanDuel, DraftKings, everything in place for gambling to happen mobily within the next few months. So why is sports betting risky? Again, the availability and accessibility is increasing, especially if we are able to pick up our phones and just put in a website or go on an app and place a bet and have it be connected right from our banking accounts. Or it could appeal to teenagers if they're interested in sports to that capacity and could utilize potentially stealing credit cards from parents or loved ones. There's a wide appeal with sports. It's highly competitive and fun. So that overlap between the competition with gambling as well as sports can definitely be a risky environment. And of course, there are an infinite number of gambling opportunities within one game or sporting event. You could bet on the game numbers as a whole. You could bet on specific players, specific quarters, or parts of the game. So it really is infinite, like this says. So just to note, I want to squeeze in some warning signs of what happens when someone develops a problem with gambling. So the DSM-5 notes that these types of warning signs happen when someone is diagnosed with compulsive gambling. So their tolerance to gambling increases. The withdrawal whenever they don't gamble also increases. There is a lack of control involved within their gambling. So, for example, they may bet more than they can afford to lose. There's also preoccupation about the game of gambling, their game of choice, when not gambling. Escape gambling is definitely up there because if they, for example, are having a tough time in their life, this game or this gambling opportunity that they enjoy really helps them to feel better, which goes into chasing losses. You're chasing those losses with money that you don't have. And in turn, all of these kind of things overlap. You see an increase in lying or deceit, hiding things, which is why problem gambling is coined the hidden addiction. There's also loss of money, of course, but loss of relationship, trust. We've got loss of job productivity, and then going into bailout, asking friends for bailouts in a desperate attempt to, get things under control. So now we'll talk about problem gambling and gambling disorder. So about 2 million adults, which is about roughly 1% of the US population, are estimated to meet criteria for several gambling-related problems. And another 4 to 6 million would be considered to have a mild or moderate gambling problem. So, of course, when someone calls us looking for information or looking to get connected to care, it's up to the client or the clinician for them to determine what the severity of their gambling problem is. So they'll go through a set of questions with them to determine, where they land in the role of between, mild or moderate gambling or severe gambling addiction. So the spectrum of gambling behaviors, of course, is a spectrum. And I just want to throw that up there for you so you can kind of see visually what it looks like. Non-gambling, of course, is anyone who abstains from gambling in any capacity. At-risk gambling is considered the majority of the population, so social gamblers also. just people that can do this more recreationally, like it's designed to do. So, they are typically putting tabs on how much money they spend, how much time they spend, being upfront and honest with loved ones about, the gambling, where they're going, if they are going somewhere, or just saying, hey, I put $10 down on this bingo game on my phone. Just being able to kind of see that can be transitioned into their fun money for the week. So then we talk about problem gambling, which is really just anytime someone is having issues with their gambling. So that could be translated into financial struggles, not being able to pay monthly dues on their car or their house or their rent, not being able to fund money for other things that are important in their lives or necessary. But also we have loss of, as I mentioned earlier, trust or relationship struggles. A lot of the time when people call us, if it's a spouse, they're having issues with the significant other, and they may be, I don't know what to do with this person. They're not willing to receive help. I want a divorce. We see that a lot. So there's a lot of helplessness and hopelessness at that point. And it's definitely individualized. Every single person that calls, the person before them did not have the same issue, but everyone is kind of overarching in the umbrella of problem gambling. And then, of course, gambling disorder is really just when a professional diagnoses you as having problem gambling or compulsive gambling. So that's when they go through those steps with you and those questions to determine where you fall in gambling disorder. Some quick information on the comparison between social and recreational gambling versus problem and disorder gambling. So I'll just leave that up there for a minute if you want to take a look at that. But something that I do want to note is just the thinking behind this. So when someone is gambling recreationally, they have realistic expectations. I'm hoping for a big win, but I'm expecting to lose because that it's just designed that way. The house almost always wins. Places like this wouldn't be in business if it wasn't rigged for the house to win typically. But then with someone who has disordered gambling, may have irrational thinking and always expecting that next win, which pulls them in to place that next bet. So I'm going to talk about just briefly how problem gambling affects males and females differently. So the data suggests that females typically don't develop a gambling problem until they're a little bit older, so more middle-aged, maybe late 30s to early 50s, but they can develop problem gambling at a much quicker rate once they start gambling at that time. So it comes on suddenly, and they typically tend to lean more towards games that really just don't require a lot of focus, stuff that they can just kind of sit back and just let the penny drop or whatever. We've seen a lot of people enjoying the casinos or bingo or just easy fun games like that, whereas males typically tend to gamble earlier on in their lives, but they develop a problem a little bit slower. So they're gambling in their 20s or in college, and they don't have a transition to a problem if they are still gambling until a little bit later on in their lives. So it really just depends, of course, on the scenario, but as a group, this is what we're seeing. And I forgot to mention females gamble to escape stress and trauma, whereas males gamble for excitement and competition. So this picture just depicts what a gambling problem would look like in a sea of people. So one person who has a gambling problem can affect between 8 and 10 additional people. So what that means is really not only is the problem gambler struggling, but between 8 and 10 people can also be struggling as well, which is why we offer our services not only to someone who has a gambling problem, but also to loved ones that are impacted by this. So just wanted to note really quickly some other special populations that are included. We see a lot with seniors and retirees that develop a problem, and that can be for a variety of reasons, but typically because they're lonely and they want that social connection when they go out and go to the casino, for example. They're bored. They need something out of the ordinary just to kind of get them excited about everyday life. We have college students that are also impacted, college students and also adolescents as well, because a lot of them are still developing, the brain is still developing. So those impulse skills are still up there. So they still want to look for high risk and high reward activities. We also have veterans as a special population that we want to note that could also be impacted more so than the general population by problem gambling. But really, with this type of program, it's nice because we're able to offer up different presentations for different organizations that want to learn more about specific things. So we've had people ask us for presentations more jumping into the college student population. So this presentation is really just kind of like, here's a general way that you can see what happens with problem gambling, but there's also much more information out there that we are learning even more so today about specific populations. So it's pretty interesting to note. This part is really important. I do want to highlight on problem gambling, addiction, and mental health, because more often than not, problem gambling is kind of piggybacking off of these other issues. So with co-occurrence with substance use disorder, we see about 73% of those who have a gambling problem also have alcohol use disorder. About 38% have a drug use disorder, and about 60% have a nicotine dependence. And then in talking about other issues with comorbidities, we've got a little over 49% of those with gambling disorder have a mood disorder. About 61% of those with a gambling disorder have a personality disorder, and kind of overlapping, those with GD have been treated for their other mental health problems, but not gambling. So this visual is very important. I feel like it sticks out to me the most out of anything in this presentation because it's just so eye-catching. But when talking about problem gambling and suicide, there is a direct connection, unfortunately. It is the highest rate of suicide among any addiction. So with problem gambling or gambling disorder, it's about 1 in 5 problem gamblers have either attempted or completed suicide. So I do want to note here, just because COVID has impacted everything, of course. And then now that, we're kind of getting over it a little bit, we're starting to see some more trends and connections between COVID-19 and problem gambling. So from what we saw last year, people with gambling problems are less likely to have health, financial, and recovery capital. So the job losses, the furloughs, the financial pressures, and lost income may lead to more gambling to try to win that money back. We saw that the closures and quarantines may also exacerbate social isolation. I know that, of course, from experience, I felt extremely isolated, but also increases feelings of anxiety and stress, also depression, and adding further barriers to services like traditional counseling, group counseling, and self-help groups. So a lot of those resources transitioned to being online. And I know that we had to act fast and everyone had to jump in head first, but some people may not have felt comfortable with it, or it wasn't as helpful as it used to be. So we definitely saw a little bit of loss to care in that regard. And then, of course, with COVID-19, everything shifted online, as I mentioned. So shifting to gambling online, why not? It's right there. All types of gamblers are at all stages of recreational and problem gambling. So you could get Joe, who just wants his daily or his monthly poker tournament, but you might have Nadine, who is just looking for that interaction and something fun to do because no one else is able to come see her. So what we've seen just comparatively in the other parts of the world, so a UK study, increase in time spent engaging in online gambling, longer sessions occurred and more money was being wagered. So I wonder if that is any correlation to, not actually physically holding the money. It's not tangible, it's there, but you're not able to really see it. And then on the Ontario study, online gambling is associated with higher risk or more money, of course, being wagered, and particularly impacted adults, young adults, ages 18 to 24. So just as a recap, the Problem Gambling Resource Centers throughout New York State raise awareness of problem gambling throughout their regions. But we also connect individuals and families who are adversely affected by gambling to the help they need. So here's some offerings that we have. Typically what we do is when someone calls the PGRC, our main focus is really to, of course, figure out what they need. So if they're looking for one-on-one counseling, that's usually the route that people like to go. They get connected to and schedule an initial meeting with a local mental health professional. And we can also offer telecounseling options as well. Uninsured or underinsured, the PGRCs will help cover the cost of counseling when cost is a barrier. Meeting clients where they are, providing information. So once information is obtained, as much or as little information as the client wants to offer, we can connect them to options such as GA or Gam-Anon, which is Gamblers Anonymous, the 12-step help group. There's also other recovery groups such as Smart Recovery, which are to get connected with other agencies in the region to provide them with the support that they need if they're not quite ready to receive one-on-one counseling. And we also have information on voluntary self-exclusion, which is really helpful for people that have an addiction to the casino. So if someone wants to self-exclude, it's really just basically a self-ban from the casino, any New York State owned and operated casino for a certain amount of time. So I did want to note some of the screenings and assessments that are existing right now for problem gambling. So the ones listed under brief screens, we have a few of those options. So if any of you are looking for just a brief screen to show people that you know, or just to have it on hand in case someone might need it, you can definitely find that information on our website, and it's been listed below, but I can also send the information along as well. And then below that, the diagnostic screens are typically used by mental health practitioners. So here's an example of one of the brief screening tools. So this is what we like to offer to our partners, especially during Problem Gambling Awareness Month, which is in March, or Recovery Month, just to offer a quick resource to talk with clients and patients about their gambling behavior. So I don't know why Sarah's on here. It must have been under the last presentation. So Sarah's one of our program managers. So our program managers are the ones who answer our Hopeline calls. So that number that you see below, the 351-2262, will be covered by either Sarah or David in our region that you can see that we cover. So we have 12 counties, and we're always here to lend a hand, provide education, provide materials, and of course, get people connected to barrier-free help.
Wow, thank you.
Of course, I know that's a lot of information, and we can go into as much of the questions as you want. But what were your initial thoughts on that?
Very informative. And again, I do think that the conversation, I'm not really hearing it a lot. So we don't really hear a lot about problem gambling in support groups. And I know you and I have talked in the past about whether that's that there's just still so much stigma associated with it, and there are a lot of other substance use support groups everywhere. And this one not so much.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so I'm really curious about that, and just it's it's puzzling.
Yeah.
And especially, one thing I wanted to clarify. Um, you've mentioned before that gambling addiction actually has the highest suicide prevalence among addictions. Is that
Among
correct?
all addictions, yep. So if comparatively speaking with someone who has a substance use disorder, it wouldn't be scaled as high as what the data shows for problem gambling and suicide, unfortunately. So it's a lot of that overlap that we really want to let the community know that this is an issue, but it's something that's behind the scenes and something that is not really talked about first and foremost. But it's definitely something that needs to be handled because of all those other issues that can occur if it doesn't go untreated.
Sure. Um, we're, there's definitely an uptick in crisis calls to suicide lines in the last year
Mhm.
or two, especially as people are really isolated, and isolation from the pandemic definitely has an impact on and change really the way we live. Like you were mentioning, everything
Mhm.
transitioned online, and so everything's easier that way. Um,
Absolutely.
and many more people kind of got skilled at being online that may not have in the past. And these behaviors can just be, or these activities can just be easier to access. um, I am, again, I wanted to talk about the issue or the idea of suicide, because a
Mhm.
couple of the population groups that you mentioned, veterans and students or young people, um, those are populations that have high suicide rates, and adding this particular complication to whatever they're experiencing. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know about the regional information directly relating to both of those populations, but from a programmatic standpoint and the information that we have, of course, gambling, I'll talk first about students, so young people. So gambling is occurring about 40% of young adults ages 12 to 17 gamble at least once in the past year. So when I provide that statistic for a lot of people, they're like, wait, but they're underage. How are they able to gamble? So unfortunately, the top three forms of gambling for students and young people are, scratch off tickets, because they're receiving them from family for birthday presents, for stocking stuffers, what have you, for fun events, and they think it's harmless. And unfortunately, that's not the case with some kids, because the earlier they are exposed to gambling, the higher likelihood that they will, transition to a gambling problem later on in their life. So having that exposure and that availability at that age, the normalization is there. So we're definitely seeing that in that regard, as a potential harm in the future for someone as young as even 10. We've seen even younger sometimes, depending on when they receive those lottery tickets. But for veterans, what I can say there is we just started to expand our offerings for the connection between problem gambling and veterans, because we have a veteran outreach coordinator who works within the council now. So that's fantastic. So he does a lot of outreach and presentations in partnership with partners all across the state that work with veterans and military personnel and families. So what we've seen there is, once they're transitioning back into society, sometimes they can feel kind of a loss in a way, and they kind of gravitate towards those types of activities just to feel like they're more part of society. They're trying to escape. We see that escape gambling happening again. But a lot of the time, it can be trauma induced from the trauma that they experienced while they were active duty, and using gambling as a means to cope, because it's not physically harming them, such as with alcohol or drugs would potentially cause harm. Gambling wouldn't cause physical harm, at first, but of course, the mental component can also translate to the physical component. There's so much overlap with, if you're not taking care of yourself or you don't have money to, then the physical will suffer.
Yeah, and a active service person also is engaged in high risk environment and activity
Absolutely.
a lot of the time. So, if they're engaging in high risk behaviors like gambling, that could potentially kind of replicate or attempt to replicate those same feelings. And with young people, I know I've complained about my pet peeve when my kids were younger in high school, and the idea of casino night for fundraisers for like prom fundraising and that sort of thing. And I could just never believe that adults were presenting that to young people as a great activity. They had a great time doing it, and it was fun to dress up and hang out that way, but it seemed really problematic.
Yeah, and
to me.
not to say that it would cause harm for everyone, but it's definitely, if you're increasing the availability, especially to the underage, it's really not the smartest idea in the long run.
Sure. And I think at that point it was about maybe 10 years ago, but different than today because the prevalence and the access is so much higher, I think, for young people to be online. You mentioned that PGRC offers to cover counseling if finances are an issue. I would imagine that happens a lot in a situation where gambling and risk is involved. But does this kind of counseling not get covered on insurance?
Actually, we're starting to see that some insurance companies, such as Blue Cross Blue Shield, are paying back the clinicians for these services. So some of our clinicians on our panel have their own panel of insurances that if someone wanted to use their insurance, they could. And we encourage that because we want insurance companies to see that this is a billable service. Someone's coming in for treatment for their gambling problem. So it can be compared to, talking to someone about their substance use or someone talking about their mental health issues. So we just want to make that clear, but also we have a nice program that is setting up for people that maybe feel uncomfortable using their insurance. They don't want their significant other to know. They feel more comfortable not having that, which could be a barrier for some folks. So we want to make sure that everyone knows that if you're unable to pay, if you can, but you would rather not use your insurance, then we'll take care of the payments behind the scenes. We want to make sure that people get into treatment right then and there when they're asking for help, because we've noticed that there's a significant drop off if someone calls and they're not assisted in a timely manner.
Yeah, definitely. So that's really good to know. It's a great service that you're offering there. And also, I'm sorry to jump around a bit. Can we talk about best practices for families to approach their loved one a bit?
Yeah, sure.
What can that look like, and how? I mean, there's relationship rebuilding that will have to take place, I'm sure. And you mentioned trust issues, financial problems, communication problems, clearly, especially if people are lying or hiding the behavior because they're feeling shame. That's got to be really difficult especially when we've already talked about how strong the stigma about this particular addiction must be.
Absolutely. We never want to push services on someone that isn't ready. So that goes without saying for someone who is impacted by their loved one's gambling habits. If that person is not ready to receive treatment, unfortunately, we can't we can't assist anyone in that regard. But as far as with family and loved ones, we encourage them to come in and talk to one of our clients or clinicians about what's going on. And I would say our clinicians are very skilled in being able to provide tips and support for a loved one that really needs to, work through this part in their life and figuring out what'll be best for them. If that's, approaching them or approaching that person that is having the gambling problem and just saying, listen, I've seen this occurring for a while and this really hurts me. Do you want to work on this with me? Because this isn't healthy. Sometimes those conversations, as you know, are tough, really just to sit that person down because we love them and we care about them, but we see the destruction that's occurring, but not only for them, but for the ones around them. So we want to make sure that everyone is supported in the capacity that we can provide.
Mm-hmm. And this addiction in particular seems like there must always be a time of reckoning because money runs out. I mean, alcohol and drugs don't run out. I mean, a person could potentially have access to them for however long they can legally get them, but money doesn't last forever.
Exactly, but people find a way. So there have been instances where they take out multiple credit card lines. They're taking money out of maybe their child's college fund, their retirement, selling their house or not paying off the mortgage, like I mentioned. So then that money builds up, and then there's of course issues with bankruptcy and closing on the house. They're not able to live there anymore. So there's really, unfortunately, an overlap in that regard. But, we mostly see folks that come in and they have hit rock bottom. They're hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And just to say right now that all walks of life are impacted by problem gambling, the affluent and the low income. So, it depends on the circumstance really, and, how much money or how much destruction is happening with loved ones or with their job or with school, with college students. We've seen them flunking out because of their gambling habits, meeting with bookies and that kind of stuff. So it really is a very, unfortunately, a hidden addiction, as I mentioned.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned several things that might constitute gambling, different types of activities that might be considered gambling. And I think at like the beginning of 2020, there was a young man who was like 20 years old who had died by suicide because he was trading. And there was an error or something that happened on, with his account that showed he was like $700,000 in debt.
Yes.
What are you thinking about? What is your organization, or do you have a position or, information about young people using online trading?
Yeah, that's also become a hot topic, now that you mentioned that. So anything with cryptocurrency, online trading, we've noticed that the younger population is gravitating towards that because they see the growth component associated with putting your money in and investing. I will say that, you're risking your money and with a chance that it could go in the red. So I want to say, from my standpoint, that is gambling. It's to one person it's investing, to another person it's gambling, but there is gambling involved with that. So of course that's a very good explanation to what you're seeing, as far as if someone woke up one day and they saw that they were in the red that far, I don't want to live anymore because I'm so far in debt, I'm never going to be able to pay this back. So unfortunately, more often than not, we see people that are having those thoughts or attempts or completion. So it really is something to note when we do talk about gambling and how day trading is becoming like a current trend and a way for people that a lot of people want to try to make money. I mean, who doesn't want to make money? But of course, there's that risk involved with this as well.
Sure. And with that activity, there's a really great learning curve. I mean, someone can do it and do it knowledgeably, and really learn some best practices about how to do it and make wise investments. But still can be pretty risky.
Yeah.
Especially when you're a young person and you have so much else going on, that you're trying to manage in your life too.
Yes.
And I did want to touch a little bit more about what we're talking about is this, with a person not wanting to live anymore because these are just helpless and hopeless situations or seemingly for them. And at NAMI, we say 1 in 5, or now it's closer to 1 in 4 individuals experience mental health condition.
Yeah.
And 5 in 5 are impacted by it, whether you're neighbors or family members or classmates or colleagues. We're impacted by each other's experiences. And you mentioned each person's gambling addiction might impact
between 8 and 10 individuals.
8 and 10. Yes. Yeah. Well, we also had a forum or a discussion online last week or the week before about suicide prevention. And that number was over 130 people are impacted by each person who dies by suicide. And so when we put all these numbers together, that's a lot of people who are impacted by addiction, mental health, mental illness, and suicide. So it seems like this is a very important topic that we need to find more ways to get information out about. And I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not really hearing, and I don't think we've heard tonight about the success rate of treatment for problem gambling. I don't know how complicated treatment might be. It's probably pretty complicated considering it's not really even, I mean, I don't know how many screening questionnaires it's actually on if you have substance use or if you have a gambling addiction,
Right.
So it seems like education and what you're doing is probably our best bet, as far as reaching out to people and getting people the help that they need.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that from our talks within the community and doing like one-on-one key informant interviews, it really helps us to determine, specifically from town to town within the Finger Lakes region, what's the best course of action for letting people know about resources. There's that stigma, of course, but having these educational sessions available and accessible for people, I feel like is the first step in order to really touch base on all the things within the realm of problem gambling.
So where can someone actually find services to help them in our area?
Yeah. So
like who are you going to refer them to? And,
Yeah, exactly. So we have, let's say we have about 14 or 15 clinicians right now in the Finger Lakes region. So most of them offer telecounseling. So if someone in Ithaca wanted teletherapy, we have a variety of options for people, but also we have some that are sort of close by, I would say, is not, I think it's Nichols, New York. Is that pretty close to you guys? Or Owego?
Okay.
Owego, yeah, it's Owego. Okay. So we have a couple of clinicians in Owego, and we're trying to expand more in the Binghamton region to have more clinicians. But the first course of action is just to give us a call. The person on the other end is, excited to take your call because they want to help you. We want to see you succeed, and in providing as much or as little information as the person wants, we're able to kind of work with them to determine what will work best for you. What can we do to help?
Great. What can we do to help?
Spread the word. If you're ever talking about mental health, include problem gambling in your conversation. I guarantee people will be like, wait, what? And then when we start talking about it and how it overlaps with other issues, I feel like then it's at the forefront of people's minds. And then they're going to want to look into it more and see, here's a local resource. Here's the resource for the state. You know, it's a domino effect. So really just being able to see that people know this exists. We like coming into meetings, initial meetings, and being like, have you heard of the PGRC? Yeah, I have. And then we can initiate a conversation. Well, how'd you hear about us? And then we could really get into the good stuff.
That's great. And we sometimes, people will come to us for a support group and they're like, we never knew you existed. You're the best kept secret. Oh,
exactly.
Okay. Well, we do not want to be a secret.
No, we want to
tell all your
from the
friends.
rooftops.
Right, exactly. And conversations like this definitely, I think, are really important to reducing the stigma and making this a much more open topic for people to feel comfortable discussing and seeking help. So I really appreciate all this information that you're sharing with us. And I know that when I am communicating with people, I will definitely share your information in groups and in our classes as well. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts that you want to share with us before we finish this evening.
Yeah, if anyone is going to watch this or has watched this, at this point, please feel free to reach out to me via email if you want to connect and talk more about this. Maybe you've seen more information on particular types of gambling or people that are impacted. So I'd love to have a conversation and learn more about how we can better assist the Tompkins County community.
Great. And do you have anything coming up that you want to share? Any events or any other programs that do you want to talk a little bit about your podcast?
Yeah, so we actually, Beth was our latest guest on our podcast, which is What Are the Odds? And it's in partnership with fingerlakes1.com. So about every month or every couple months, we have about a 20-minute episode that just talks about problem gambling and another issue and how they're connected. So we try to bring in guests that are experts in the field of, for example, for mental health, or we have someone talking about healthy alternatives to gambling. So we've got an array of listening options for you. So if you go to fingerlakes and the number 1.com and search What Are the Odds, you'll be able to view our podcast.
Great. I've listened to several of your episodes now, so they're very informative. Your guests are great.
Oh, awesome. I'm so glad.
And so I have learned a lot, and I hope everyone else has found this to be really informative. And I know that we're going to benefit by having this available online for people to watch and review. And the recording of this program should be up by next week for people to find on our YouTube channel. Perfect. So I would like to thank you, Jenna, for coming on to Family Forum this evening. And everyone, please reach out to PGRC. We will share the contact information and links in the program notes of this event as well. So thank you for watching, and everyone be safe and good night.
Take care.